Once Rudy and Emmanuel Mudiay did not go to shoot around that day, I think you just felt that the virus at that point was impacting every story you ever heard.
And then when Quinn brought us down to the a little side room and told us just to relax, and then said he wanted to inform us that Rudy was being tested. And I thought, wow, this is really hitting close to home.
It was just a routine, day for me, sitting next to Bowler, getting ready to tip off.
Was looking down the corner of my left eye, and to see the doctor, I believe, from the Thunder run onto the floor. And this is just seconds before tip-off, and just shutting things down. And from that moment on, life changed.
From our bird's eye view, from where we are, we saw the doctor running out on the floor, and he started talking to the coaches, and you could just see that, they were listening very carefully to what he had to say.
Right before tip, I usually do a pre-tip hit under the basket, and I'm talking about Tony Bradley filling in for Rudy Gobert, getting the start. And then all of a sudden, after I'm done with the hit, I turn around, walk towards my seat, and there's a stoppage. And okay, what is going on? Trying to get an idea of what's going on the bench. You can hear the players talking back and forth. I talked to Mike Conley. I'm like, what is going on? He's like, well, I hope it's not what we think it is. I just think it was a total surreal experience. I think the players as well, just looking at the conversations and the expressions. I mean, everybody at that point is in shock. Really, the team's ushered back into the locker room. I'm trying to walk back there.
As we were sitting there, we were trying to tap dance, right, Bowler? We were trying to tap dance a bit, because in our minds, I think we really knew. It wasn't until we got back there in that room that it really all sank in, I think, for me.
They bring us off the floor, right? When we all get the message that we've got to rush down, like we're live on the air. I'm like, oh, we got to go. We're going to break. And I literally say down the line, like, oh, and we're not going to be
to
back.
The locker room, drop everything you have, and you'll be able to retrieve it later, but get to the locker room. That's when Quinn came and gave us this very direct, I think, calming speech of, we're all in it together. No one's going or leaving anybody. And then wait for your instructions or wait for the next move, because this is ongoing. This was a very fluid situation.
When he came in that locker room and spoke to us, and it was just that calming presence, and you felt like you had somebody really taking care of you and looking out for you. But I did cry. You guys remember, I was sitting there like, oh my gosh, are we gonna be here?
Remember, she looked at me and said, hey, Bowler, are we going to be in this room for 14 days? I said, I don't think so. But, there is a bathroom right over here, and there's a cooler full of water. We should be okay.
Let me chime in here, because, Bowler and David, they had to interview these players. And so I'm thinking in the back of your mind that, you had to be pretty close and up front with some of these players while you're interviewing them, that it's a possibility.
Tell the truth. Huh? Tell the truth. You were looking, tell the truth.
David, stay away.
Wait, were you worried that the people in close proximity to the players might have?
I sit next to David, I broadcast next to him. Yeah, I was worried. He had to interview these guys, I didn't want him to back to me, so.
I thought all of us were I honestly was like, oh man, if Rudy's positive, we were sitting in that room, just being on the team plane together, being on the bus together, the close proximity. There's no way we don't. And I was surprised that none of us, that only 2 people in the entire team tested positive.
When the second knock on the door came, and we all walk out, one single file, there were people in hazmat gear. And we went into the locker room, and the players had already been tested. And I looked out to my corner of my eye. There was Bojan with a mask. That's the first mask that I witnessed, was on Bojan Bogdanovic. And then all of us took our turns, almost taking photos and laughing at who was going to throw up first when they gave us the test. And I just want to tell people who watch this, we were maybe the first. We had to be the first. That the test was not just a nasal swab, it was the real deal. And we survived it, but man, I cried, I teared up, and I was sitting there for 5 minutes trying to recover after that moment.
Bowler, I know. I got it on video. Saving it in the archives, pal.
Yeah. And they found a hotel that took us in, but nobody greeted us. You remember there were just a bunch of keys on a table, and all they said was, take one, go to your room.
That would be the
Get a phone call sometime in the morning to let you know the status of your test.
I just remember not being able to sleep that night. I don't know what time we got to the hotel. Maybe it was 3 a.m. I'm not sure, but I couldn't sleep that night and waiting in anticipation for the results, telling my mom and my family, I'm pretty sure we're positive.
Being in that hotel and just waiting and being isolated by yourself, right? And waiting for that phone to ring with whatever news is going to come was kind of intense. Hard to sleep that night, I know, for sure.
Anybody get the same feel I did when about 8:45 hit the next morning and the phone rang, and what your thoughts were just before you picked up the phone, knowing it was going to be a life-changing moment?
You know, when that phone rings, you just don't know what to think. I'm going to find out right now.
We travel together on the bus together. And then the moment that they said you're negative, it's like, wow, how can that even be possible?
To find out that out of all the people that were tested, only 2 of them were tested positive. We were in that room together there as well, and that room was not that big.
I think we were mostly worried about you doing it because the information I did have was that the older folks were going to struggle.
I appreciate your concern there, Terrell.
We were just part of this potentially logistical nightmare, but to have to know that all that work is going on behind the scenes to try to figure out on the fly what's going to happen to this group of people, where they're going to stay, how long, all that behind the scenes stuff that we weren't able to see, those folks should be commended as well.
I thought it was so impressive that we did get on that plane and that the flight attendants, the pilots were willing to take us back, and that the states allowed us to, for one, leave Oklahoma, and then second, to get into the state of Utah. And it was really smooth. But there was certainly a time, which is why I keep bringing up that I did cry, that I thought for 14 days we'd be in Oklahoma City.
I remember too, when we got to Salt Lake, we went to the hangar, and we had after we had talked to the Oklahoma Department of Health, we then talked to the Utah Department of Health, and they took all of our questions. I salute them because they gave me a sense of direction and, kind of took the panic level down a little bit.
Can I jump in and ask you guys all a question? Because I actually have another memory we've not talked about. And that was that we all tell the news. That's what we do for a living. And there we sat for 5 hours in a room watching the news about us. And it was the weirdest flip that I've ever experienced in my life, and then the other thing is we learned is how much of the news was accurate, right? I would say that it was probably 85% accurate, but without saying names of people, because I don't want to criticize anyone who's reporting live in a really tumultuous situation. But there were a lot of stories of that weren't true. We knew they weren't true. We were hearing them on CNN and being like, oh, that's actually not the way it works. But that to me is actually one of the biggest memories I have, is watching the news that I was a part of, instead of reporting on the news.
That was bizarre, looking up at those screens and having all of the world talking about that moment. And we are a part of that moment.
There were so many more people worse off than us. When you talk about 500,000 people losing their lives or more. But I think it really gives us a good perspective. I don't know if things will ever be normal again. I don't know how they can be the normal that we once knew, whether it's our profession or how we live our lives in this world. I look at life differently now. I look at my family differently now.
We had a hell of a story to tell, but there's so many others out there that are much more important and impactful than ours.